Hi there, my name is Philip Ideson. I'm the Managing Director of Art of Procurement. We're a leading source of trusted, actionable insights for forward-thinking procurement leaders dedicated to increasing their impact on business growth. And we do that via podcasts, events, webinars, and consulting services. Now, over the course of my 20-plus year procurement career as a practitioner, a leader, a consultant, and now a business owner, I frequently utilize ProcurementIQ's supply and supplier market insights. In a moment, I'm going to share the top 3 parts of the reports I go to regardless of what I'm buying. But before I do, I wanted to share why that my company and I uses ProcurementIQ. Now, first of all, at the macro level, I can use the information to help me proactively build a wave plan of potential expense management projects and prioritize those for action. A couple of ways this helps is by supporting corporate cost reduction initiatives and also procurement resource allocation decisions. Second, the data helps me get engaged much earlier with stakeholders on projects. And as we all know, that's an age-old problem for procurement. Here at Art of Procurement, we always say that you have to show up with insights that go beyond what a stakeholder may have access to themselves or interpret them in a way the stakeholder hasn't really considered to be seen as a strategic partner rather than someone who runs a process. And the data from ProcurementIQ helps us do that. Next, when used appropriately, the insights within the reports help to close that information gap between me as a buyer and the seller. So this changes the dynamics both within individual negotiations, but also across broader supplier relationships. And then finally, the information can accelerate sourcing and RFP cycle times by informing strategy. So for example, should we stick with an incumbent negotiation rather than going to market? Or by providing information you typically seek to acquire during an RFI or an RFP process. Okay, so with all that said, let me show you the 3 areas of the report that I use regardless of what I buy. So let me take you through the top 3 areas of the report that I go to no matter what I am buying. And as you come in every report, you come to this home screen. The first place that I go is into Buyer Power Score. As you can see, Buyer Power Score just gives you that really good insight into what leverage you may have in the marketplace and how the marketplace is changing, whether it's flipping from being one where buyers have the power to suppliers have the power, whether it's relatively neutral, and importantly, how that's changing over time. That really helps you look at, how long of a contract should I put in place if I have to go to market right now? Because how is the buyer power projected to change over time? It's always really interesting as well to see, what are some of the reasons for that. So, example, in this category, recent price trends are negative for the buyer, so that suggests that prices are increasing. But you can see there's, as you kind of look in the report, you can drill down into any of these to see what it is that makes up that buyer power score component. The second place that I go to is to look at market dynamics. Now, market dynamics really brings everything together in one place. It's just a good, really snapshot of, okay, so I kind of understand what the buyer-supplier power relationship looks like. Let's go into some of the specifics. For example, you can see here, prices trending, so prices are increasing. You can see what supply chain risk is. Is that something that I need to dig into further? ESG, is that something that may be an opportunity for me around sustainability? Now you have, as well as you go down the reports, just some trends or some things to be aware of, some red flags. Those are things just to be aware of as you're starting to think about what your strategy is for this category or for this sourcing event. I do want to just talk very briefly about market pricing. So you see in all reports the market pricing number. I think it's important to keep in mind a few different things when looking at market pricing to make sure you're gleaning the right information from there. There's many different factors that go into a market's price, so it's important to think about your company's specific situation before leveraging any external data in your negotiations. I always recommend investigating this price point further, and you can do that in the dedicated market pricing chapter. When I go into the report and go to market pricing, a good tell for me on whether it's something that I can use when I'm talking to my suppliers is this range here. If I'm dealing with a tight range, then it's a pretty good indication that I can use this price point in talks with my suppliers to inform the pricing that they're coming to the table with. For a broader range, the price point listed may need some manipulation before you bring it to your negotiations, and you can come down to the market pricing factors and begin to understand which side of the spectrum pricing may lean toward. The third place that I always recommend that and that I always go to, when I'm looking at a category, because it builds on that market price, is actually the cost structure benchmarks. This is really, really powerful for me. So what's more important to me is not necessarily what a market price is, but how is that price made up? What are the cost drivers that are going into that price? And so you can see that there are details on what makes up the price of this category and how that's trending over time. As you start to get into the data, there's a lot more specifics around input costs, and you can actually download some statistics as well here directly out of the report. What that helps with is understands, for example, if you're in an inflationary environment or even deflationary environment, then you can start to look at how should that price be changing from where I am today, from what my baseline is, based on things that are happening in the market, and how is that impacting total cost. It's also something that's really great for you to be able to start to share with your suppliers in a negotiation so they can say, okay, I don't believe this bit, or I see that bit, and I understand that bit. And, you can kind of start having much more of a transparent discussion when you start talking about the nuts and bolts of a cost structure as opposed to the overall price. So that is where I go as well. Now, as a little bit of a bonus, depending on what I buy, then I will go and look at other things in the report. For example, we looked at before related to ESG trends. I'm interested in risk, so I typically will go and have a look at the risk as well. If it's an area that's regulated, that provides me with some interesting insights. And then if it's something that I've not really bought before, business requirements just gives you an interesting kind of look at what are the kind of things that I should be asking my stakeholders, what are the kind of things I should be thinking about to put in an RFP. So those can be insightful just depending on what you buy. But depending on my experience with what I'm buying, that will kind of form into whether I go there. So I hope that that's been helpful. As I say, the top 3 areas that I go every single time into a report is that buyer power score, looking at market dynamics, and looking at cost structures.